Hello and welcome to the RIA Tech Talk Podcast, brought to you by, of course, RIA WorkSpace. I'm Todd Doroka, and alongside me is always Mr. David Kakish, and together we're on a mission to simplify the complex world of technology for RIAs just like yours. Now, in this podcast, we'll be your tech guides, breaking down those often confusing tech topics into plain and practical terms for you. And so we hope you join us for each episode as we dive into the latest tech trends, share our expert insights, and help you navigate the ever-changing world of RIA technology. And so today, Mr. David, we are looking at on-site servers. So specifically ditching your on-site server and how kind of a simple guide for RIAs to do that, right?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. And, every time you say Mr., I look behind to look for my dad, so it doesn't matter how old I get. I'm always going to turn around and look and say, hey, is my dad behind me, so. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is, ditching your on-site server, a simple guide for RIAs. And I use the word on-site server. It could be a network attached storage. It could be a shared computer. It could be, a shared drive, whatever you want to call that. There's still a good amount of RIA, like talking about the cloud is all the buzz and this and that, but it made a lot of sense for RIAs that invested in an on-site server to go ahead and leverage that, right? So if you bought an on-site server, you want to maximize your investment and go ahead and leverage that. And today we're going to talk about how and why you want to ditch your on-site server and move to the cloud and how to do that, and really the best way for you to do that as an RIA. And again, as a reminder, this isn't going to be like a super detailed technical discussion that's designed for an IT tech person. It's really designed for you as a managing partner or as a chief compliance officer. We'll touch a little bit upon the technology, but not too much. We're going to geek out just enough for a managing partner or a CCO to understand, not for like an IT manager to understand. So we always try to do, go deep enough, but not too deep where we lose you. So
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we do that. And so by the end of the session today, you're going to learn how to get rid of the on-site server, why you'll never want to buy an on-site server again, and to also understand, even if you don't have an on-site server, how does security and how can you secure your cloud environment when you do get rid of your on-site server? Because that's a pretty common concern and fear that people have when they move to an on-site server. So go ahead, Todd.
Real quick, question. How often do you see clients with on-site servers? I mean, I remember my dad, when he was running his private medical practice, he had, 2-3 servers in the back room, and it was always crazy to me. So how many clients do you see on that on average, or is it pretty minimal now?
By the way, is your dad still practicing or is he retired?
He's semi-retired. He's a kind of like a professor doctor. So best way I can describe it. But no, yeah, he's retired now after 40 some years. So.
All right, sounds good. So to answer your question, in terms of an on-site server or network attached storage or something of that sort, what I see a lot is like the email has moved to the cloud, right? But there's still like an on-site file server, or maybe it's running an application or something like that. I would say there's still a good percentage out there, maybe like a third of RIAs still have some kind of an on-site server in some capacity. So out of every 10 people I talk to, 3 people have that. And again, it's not a bad thing. They're just maximizing the investment that they bought. So definitely it's not like a majority of RIAs out there, but there's still, it's about 30%. But even the 70%, even if you're listening to us and you don't have an on-site server, you still want to tune in, because I'm going to help you understand, how you can secure your cloud environment and really kind of best practices, what we're doing for other RIAs. So, but that's what it is, Todd.
All right. Nice.
Yeah. So I feel like, where we're at now, it's sort of like an end of an era, and it's the end of the on-site server era. And, it's hard for people to believe this, but, in the world of IT, it's like dog years, right? Things.
True.
And by the way, dog years, is it one human, like 7
one
years
human year is 7
7
years in dog years.
Okay.
Yes.
So
yes.
my dog's what, 6 times 7. Okay. All right. So that's how old my dog is today. When you think about email, right? I can't remember the last time I talked to an RIA that still had an on-site server that was running email. So if you think about like 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, almost everybody, a lot of people started moving their emails from an on-site server to the cloud, whether it was Microsoft or Rackspace or Intermedia. Those are kind of like some of the big players. Rackspace was a really, really, really big player for a long time before, Microsoft came onto the scene. But if you think about that, your email running on an on-site server, and remember, you had to have a lot of redundancy, and if you lost power, you potentially lost email, and Microsoft had small business server and exchange server and this and that, and there was just all this complexity, and sometimes you had to have like multiple servers in your office and virtualize the servers, and so Todd, like that from your dad's story, right?
Yeah, I would always like when I was at his office, I'd always walk into that back closet, and literally, I think there were like 6 or 7 servers back there just humming away, and I never understood it. And he's like, "Well, blah blah blah." So yeah, no, totally remember those. Totally remember it.
Exactly. And then when we got really smart, it was one physical server, but then you would have like 3 or 4 virtual servers, right? And stuff like that. So anyways, that era of having your email in your office is done. Nobody's really running email in their offices anymore, right? At least not in the small and mid-sized business space. I can't remember, like, I'm trying to think in the last 2 years, Todd, talking to RIAs, and we talked to them quite a bit. I can't remember a single time when somebody was still running an email server in their office, right? It was hosted, whether it was, hosted with Microsoft or Rackspace or Intermedia or, whoever. It didn't really matter. But yeah, in the last 2 years, I haven't talked to a single RIA that, had an email that's in their office. However, as I said, about a third are still running an on-site server, and we're sort of at the end of the era of you having an on-site server anymore. And again, an on-site server could be a server for files or an application, or it could be like a shared computer or network attached storage, whatever term. I'm just going to call it an on-site server, so we have that. Now, one thing I did have in my notes that I want to make sure I share with you as a listener, is one of the things that we consistently do with Microsoft, we don't go with version 1 or V2, we go with V3. And what I mean by that is, like, when Microsoft first released their email in the cloud, and this is like over 10 years ago, just like, I'd have to go back and look specifically. We didn't all of a sudden take all of our clients and said, great, let's run you on the Microsoft email, right? We were heavily partnered with Rackspace, and we used Rackspace a lot because they were great. And then once Microsoft was on V3 of their hosted email, we started moving all of our clients there. And the way we say it is, we want to make sure we're playing in the leading edge space, but not the bleeding edge. Because in bleeding edge, that's where all the bugs are, and we don't want that for us or for our clients or anything like that. So again, with Microsoft, when Microsoft releases something, we generally wait for V1, V2, and then V3, we're on the bandwagon.
You're on it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, all right. So the people that have an on-site server in their office today, what is it doing today? The main thing that I see, actually, it's 2 main things that I see that server is doing. It's files, right? So a lot of times an RIA will be using Redtail or Wealthbox as their CRM. They're using a lot of web-based applications, but they still have that server to access files, like client files, different things, and things like that. Think of that as like your file explorer. So that's number one. The second thing is, a lot of clients still have an on-site server, and they need to have it there because that server is kind of like the brain computer, or what we would call Active Directory or a domain controller. And that's sort of like the master computer or the brain computer that controls, let's say, the 10 other computers, for the advisors that work in your office. So those are kind of the 2 big ones. And then some form of like a file, like a print server, or so they can share a printer, or so they can share a scanner or something like that. Now, what I don't see, but I see it occasionally, is it's running applications. And the really simple one is, I like to use Juncture. Like, a lot of people were using Juncture server based, and then they moved to Juncture Cloud or another type of CRM or something like that. But that's kind of most of the time now when somebody's using an on-site server, they're doing, it's files, it's Active Directory, and then maybe it's some kind of like a shared printing or shared scanning. Those are kind of the main things that I see. So, okay.
Got it. So what are the, when you go in there and you see these servers in there, or what you've heard from clients, what are the big, backdraws or problems with those on-site servers?
Yeah. So it's a combination of things. Number one, it's clunky. Number two, they're expensive to maintain. Number three, and this is happens quite a bit, the VPN. So what happens is a lot of time, again, depending on the RIA, the typical setup, you've got 10 people that work and they're in the office 80% of the time, and then they'll occasionally work from home, right? So when
Hmm.
they're working from home on a company laptop, they can easily access all the web-based applications, CRM, again, Wealthbox, Redtail, so on. However, in order to access their files, they need to VPN into the office. So the ideal setup is to VPN into the network firewall in the office, and then from there you can access the files and the folders. It's just clunky. It doesn't work. It's slow. A lot of IT providers are not setting up like what they're doing is they're leaving a loophole in the firewall basically, and then you remote directly into the server. So we've seen a lot of different things. The point being is one of the biggest problems with an on-site server is if you do work remotely, now you have to kind of VPN or you can remote into the office to access your files. The other thing to think about is the backup, right? Like you've got a server that's sitting there. Where are you backing it up, right?
Hmm.
Ideally, you're backing it up to the cloud. And then it's just, it's just old technology, right? Like if you have an on-site server now, you didn't just buy it last year or two
Yeah.
years ago. It's probably been 3, 4, 5+ years, where you're using that. And I would say, listen, the two biggest risks with an on-site server, risk number one is I can tell you it's probably not backed up properly. Like we see it all the time. There's backup problems. Oh, you think it's backed up and it's not. And so my question for you is, when was the last time your IT provider gave you a backup report showing you that, oh yeah, hey, this is, so the backup is a big
Yeah.
problem.
Never seen one of those
Yeah,
before.
yeah, well,
Heard of them, but never
yeah,
seen
yeah,
them.
yeah. Well, the it's that trust but verify, right? They're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're backing it up for you. Great. What report can you show me that it's backed up?
Yeah.
And then the other risk is just hardware failure, right? If something happens, to recover that, it could take days or even weeks,
Mm.
right? And I know this in intimate details, like back where we were working with clients and it was mission critical. What we did is we set up like a primary server and then kind of like another a replication server or hot standby or whatever term you want to use, right? So we had like a primary one because it was mission critical, but then and think about like your email. You couldn't afford to have your email down or your
Yeah.
application or any of that, right? And then you had the second one that was essentially kind of a replica. If the main one went down, the second one would kick in and stuff like that. Today, if you have an on-site server, I can guarantee you don't have a replica that's sitting there. And so how fast can you recover if that server fails? So anyways, listen, it's an end of an era. It was great while it
Yeah.
lasted, right? And I feel like if you have an on-site server, you're still stuck in the 1970s basketball. So
Why? What is the main reason why people are keeping those on-site servers? Is it
yeah,
just
I think
because they're scared to switch, or is it just because, they don't want to?
listen, it's a couple of things. Number one is they want to maximize their investment, which I get, right? And I feel like right now you're sort of at the end of the life of that investment, right? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and so on. That's number one. Number two, and rightfully so, like, hang on, like all this cloud stuff, like I don't understand. Like, how can I control it? How does it sit? And I'll talk a little bit about how we set it up for our clients
Got
and
it.
really how you could how you want to set it up for your own RIA. But those are very legitimate things, right? Like, hey, listen, we invested money. I want to maximize the investment. But the other
Hmm.
thing is, I have some real concerns about cybersecurity,
Hmm.
and IT compliance. Like the cloud is a generic term. Like, you remember, hey, it's on the internet. I read it on the internet, right? Well, so
Yeah.
what? I mean, you can't just say that, right? And I feel like today, I'm like, oh yeah, move it to the cloud is so generic. Like, oh yeah, like
Yeah.
I read it on the internet, right? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
so anyways, so maybe what I'll talk about, Todd, and I'll come to you if you have any questions or insights, talk about on how we move our clients and then how we maximize security. Because again, even if you don't have an on-site server, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can maximize your security. So I'll kind of turn it to you. I don't know if you had any questions or if you want me to keep going along.
No, I think that's just kind of where I want to. I'm always interested. I'm always interested to know why people hold on to quote unquote relics or things that they know are absolutely, like, obsolete. And like, I'm gonna pick on my dad here. My dad keeps like everything back in the technology, even if it's not working, just in case, like VHS players. He's still got that just in case. He's kept these servers for like old servers on like 5, 7 years, whatever, just in case. And he just now, I'm not kidding you, just now has like destroyed them all. And it's crazy. But
Yeah.
no, I'm just more asking about the dads of the world out there of like, why are you
Well,
keeping that? Just
yeah.
throw it out, you know?
I'll share this story and then I'll kind of get back to the topic at hand right here. So in a previous lifetime, I used to work a lot with in the healthcare space, right? So we did work with doctors,
Oh
and
God. Yeah.
again, this was the era where you still had to have like the on-site servers to run your your practice management and all
Hmm.
that fun stuff. And then we had a doctor, and it was like we're talking about like 7, 9-year-old servers, right? He's like, all right, I want to go and I want to sell this on eBay, right?
Ugh.
I'm like, oh my, and I'm like, listen, the risk of you potentially just putting it on eBay with patient, data,
Information.
is
Yeah.
huge. Plus,
Yeah.
don't take it the wrong way. Nobody wants a 9-year-old server. Nobody's
Yeah.
buying. But the way that the brain of of
Hmm.
doctors, they think they're really trying to recycle that.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
luckily, in the wealth management space, um, the mindset is different, and that's why
Yeah.
we're in this space, not in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
So,
So let's talk about how you help clients move on and how do you get over
all
that
right.
fear and make sure it's really smooth for them to
Yeah.
transfer.
Yeah. So one of so we've got an entire sales process, but I'll talk about, what we do. So what the files, right? The way that we basically do it is like, look, you've got a server that's sitting in your office. It's running all these files. We do that during our onboarding process when a client, becomes a client with us. And then we take all the files that they have and we move it to SharePoint. Now,
Mhm.
this is just a fancy way of basically saying, look, if I am an employee, I click on File Explorer on my computer, and then all of my files are there. What's really nice is the way that we do that is it's indexed locally on the computer, but it's all actually saved at the Microsoft Data Center. And so that's how we do that. And again, if you're using a Mac, you would use Finder to go ahead and access that. And then what the other so the two big things that they're doing is one is files, and then two, it's kind of like the brain computer, right, that manages the other 10 computers. So what we're doing is we're using Azure Directory
Mhm.
Services, Active Directory, and all that is we're using a Microsoft tool to be able to manage all these other computers. And what I mean by that is, hey, we need to make sure that Bob and Mary's computer meet the IT compliance for your RIA, right? Is it encrypted? Does it have the security and so on? And so those are probably the two big things that we do at a really high level. But I'm
Mhm.
happy to sort of expand and get into the details on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, if the way we do that for our clients, and we're partnered with Microsoft, you could do that with anybody else that you want, but this is how we do it with our clients. And Microsoft's really the 800-pound gorilla in this space. Like I said, 80+% of RIAs are using the Microsoft platform. And so the way that we typically do it is, I want you to think that what we do for our clients is we set each client up. So if you're an RIA, ABC Advisors, we set up what's called your own private tenant at Microsoft. Think of it as your own private network at Microsoft. So it'll include your email, it'll include your Office suite, it'll include your files and folders, and it includes the Active Directory and a lot of the security that we talked about. And so what we're essentially doing is we're saying, look, um, your RIA, you have your own private tenant or your own private network at Microsoft. We're making sure that that's secure and we're setting up everything there for you. On the other end, we're making sure all of your endpoints, your computers, your iPhones, and so on are secure. And then the connectivity in between is secure. And everything is in your name. It's not in our name. It's not in Microsoft's name. It's not in the broker dealer's name or anything like that. And the reason for that is we want to make sure you, as an RIA, you have ownership of that
Hmm.
private tenant or that private network that you have with Microsoft. So number one, what we do, we move the files, right? We use SharePoint, not OneDrive. OneDrive is good for you if you're a consumer or a really small business, but as an RIA, there's a lot more security, lots of security settings that we can do for you on SharePoint that are not available on OneDrive. So that's something that we do. And again, this will work really well with Macs. A typical environment, they have 2, 3 hardcore Mac users, and they're like, I'm not going to work for your RIA unless I can use my Mac, right? So we do see that, and we do have some clients that are all standardized on Macs. Those, those are the exception. That's not the norm. And then, I guess from like the file folder perspective, at a really basic level, what we set up for our clients, and I would encourage you to think about it this way if you don't have it set up in that way, is file, or let's say folder number 1 is for everybody at your company. Folder number 2 is just for you. So it's for Todd, it's for David, it's for Mary, it's for Bob. I'm working on stuff, you don't see it. And then folder number 3 is by department: sales, marketing, HR, finance, and so on. If I'm part of the HR team, I'll see that folder. If I'm not, I won't. So at a really simple level, it's basically just like 3 folders and then, subfolders from there. And so that's kind of how we do that. So anyways, so that's kind of the files. We're going to move it over to SharePoint, make sure it's set up the right way. The second piece, which is the brain computer or the Active Directory or domain controller, right? You hear a lot of the IT guys talk about that, right? I'm like, your computer is the domain controller or the Active Directory. Great. We use Azure Directory Services. You don't need to have that server. So that's a common misconception among IT people. Oh yeah, you move to the cloud, you can't do that. I'm like, no, we can use Azure Directory Services, and we do that. And then the third thing that we do for our clients is that next generation client list VPN. And what I mean by that is in the on-site server space, when you worked from home, you had to click on the Sonic Wall or the Cisco VPN to access your file server in the office. Now, your work experience, whether you're working in the office or you're working at home, is the same. It doesn't matter. You just click on that. You have a work laptop, you're working in the office, great. You take it home, you're working, great. All you do is you power up that computer. That computer, we make sure it meets your company's IT compliance requirements for your RIA. And then you click on File Explorer, and then you open up all the files, you work, you're productive, you're doing all that. And again, nothing is sitting locally on that computer. It's saved at the Microsoft data center. So I could be using so my setup, just so you know, in the office, I use a Windows computer. Every other Tuesday, I work from home. I have a MacBook for work, and I work off of my MacBook, and I don't miss a beat going back and forth. And then we, as another layer of security, we're putting like a security wrap around. We're using the next generation Defender for endpoint, and so we put a security wrap around your laptop, because we make an assumption you're probably working in the office, you're probably working from home, you're probably working on the road when you're traveling. So we want to make sure we've got that security wrap around. And then all the printing and the scanning and more, that, like, all that, you don't need the on-site server to do that. And then, there's some other things like related to the applications and advanced settings and stuff like that I can talk about, but those are more of the those are advanced things. I just kind of wanted to talk about the basic things that we set up. And I know for me, I talk about it like this is basic, but these are pretty advanced, for an RIA with, 5 employees, 15 employees, and so on, that we set up for them.
Yeah. So what is it when you say security wraparound? What does that mean? Like, I'm thinking like almost a bubble around your computer or something like that. Is that what you're trying to like?
That's
explain
exactly,
that to me.
yeah. It's like the bubble boy, but for your laptop, right? And it's a security. And what I mean by that is, what we're really doing is, if you think about, again, so RIAs fall in 2 categories, right? You work in the office most of the time, and you hardly ever work from home. And then you have ones that are like all remote and travel around a lot, and in between. So our assumption is like, look, whether you're in the office or at home or traveling, we need to protect that. And so what we're doing is, and I use a security wraparound analogy because that's perfect. What we're doing is we have the next generation firewall, intrusion prevention, antivirus, and anti-spyware on that computer to prevent any attacks from happening. And so there's some very advanced things that we can do, and we're leveraging all the Defender products from Microsoft, Defender for Endpoint. We're also leveraging, making sure that computer meets the IT compliance requirements. So Todd, as an example, if I'm working and within minutes, I'm logging in from Chicago and I'm logging in from Austin, it's going to look at that and raise a red flag and then force me to do the multi-factor authentication. because all of a sudden now it noticed something. And if there's even very suspicious activities, it might lock out my account altogether, and all that's intentional, right? And so really we're leveraging a lot of that advanced security, even though you might be 9 employees, whatever, 15 employees and so on, because to us, we know that you still need that big business or that enterprise security.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. So, all right. Sorry. I don't like, hopefully I'm not getting too much into the weeds, but I just wanted to talk
Yeah.
at a high level so that, again, if you're listening to us, some of this makes sense. And even if it doesn't, just say, hey, listen, I was listening to Todd and David. They were talking about this thing. Go to your IT provider and say, hey, look, we want to make sure we have this. We got Microsoft. We don't have this,
Yeah. So typically, how much does this migration cost? And when you compare it to the onsite server versus doing all this, and not only cost in dollars, but in time, like what's the downtime versus uptime and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the irony of that question is I I'm trying to remember the last time we like migrated somebody from an onsite server to another onsite server.
Yeah.
We just don't do that anymore,
Right.
and so
Right.
I'm like, hang on. It's I'll put it to you this way. For us, it's a lot easier to migrate, Todd's wealth management services from an on-site server to the Microsoft cloud than it is to
Mhm.
migrate you to a new on-site server.
Right.
I'll just kind of put it at that. It's for us, it's easier, it's less expensive, it's faster. And then for you, you get a lot more scale, you get a lot more security, you get a lot more stability to go along with that. So the answer to your question, I don't have hard numbers anymore because at some
Mm.
point, if I go back 5 years ago, right? Like, yeah, we could potentially go here, or we could potentially do this, depending on the unique environment of that RIA. We might, I'd say 80% of the time we still put them in the cloud, but there were
Yeah.
times when it made sense to say, no, let's buy you an on-site server and put you there.
So how long does it take then from an on-site server to the cloud when you do that migration? What's
Yeah.
that typical?
Yeah, so we do that all during our onboarding process. We have a team that just specializes in onboarding, and the
Hmm.
way that we typically do it, like from the kick, we do it within 30 days from the kickoff meeting. And what we're typically doing, Todd, is we're actually syncing everything in the background. So you work like you do every day. We're
Hmm.
syncing everything in the background. Excuse me, and then we're going to say, okay, Friday the 10th, we're going to go live. So Thursday at 4 p.m., please, you and your team don't access your files because we're going to do the final sync. And then Friday morning, when you come in at 9 a.m., you can just start working like you have. And so the quote unquote downtime is essentially one evening because we want to do the final sync. But we
Yeah.
really accomplish all this and many other things within 30 days, from the kickoff meeting. That's how we do that. So, but
Yeah.
again, you're working in parallel, right? You're not like, you don't notice. You're just working like you are today. And then we're building a parallel environment as you're working today. And then you do the final sync.
Got it.
So,
So can you talk about the typical network equipment that an RIA needs in their office,
yeah.
to make this actually work?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to some of the other things that we set up for our clients because I'm kind of a geek and these are cool things. So just by default, we also set up our clients with single sign-on for web-based applications. We set them up for data loss prevention for email. So like if I email a social security number, account number, it will encrypt it. It can notify your chief compliance officer and so on. We set up Teams archiving, email archiving, and then file archiving. And so with a lot of our clients, we'll even provide them with like an attestation letter from Microsoft saying you meet the SEC and the FINRA compliance requirements and stuff like that. So anyways, and then I will say the cost of SharePoint, you're probably already paying for that with Microsoft. You just don't know. So for your
Right.
files, 90% of our clients are already paying for SharePoint. They just don't know that they are. So, all right, now back to you. Sorry, I had to throw those
No,
things in.
it's
So
good. No.
yeah. So once all this stuff is in place and you have that, again, whether it's with us or somebody else, it doesn't really matter. The typical equipment for an office, whether you're 5 people or 25 or 55, is this. You have your internet line. Right after that, you've got like your router from your internet company. But then the pieces that we manage for you, you would have a network firewall, you would have a switch, and then you would have a wireless access point. That's it. Network firewall, switch, wireless access point. So from a network infrastructure perspective, that's really all you have. And again, if that's your core office, that's what you're going to have. And I'm not talking about like the printers and the scanners and stuff like that. I'm just talking about the network equipment. And if you open up a satellite office, it's the same thing. Network firewall, switch, and a wireless access point. And that's it. So, yeah, so that's kind of,
it's three things. That's pretty, pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, by the way, I think it's pretty cool that we're tech guys and we're telling you, get rid of all your on-site server. Don't buy all this on-site stuff. We're not asking you to buy more stuff. We're actually telling you to, there's a better solution. Get rid of this, stuff you have in your office and save money at the same time. So, usually us geeks are like, oh no, go buy this gadget, and that gadget. We're telling you, don't buy more stuff, save money, so.
Yeah. So David, as we wrap up here, key takeaways for someone, looking to get their RIAs, from an on-site to a cloud or to just stay in the cloud. What are your big takeaways that they should remember?
Yeah, I think, listen, if you have an on-site server, it's an end of that era. Just like you moved your email to the cloud, we can move your files and your on-site server to the cloud. Much better solution. You're going to be a lot happier. And then even if you don't have an on-site server and you thought you're okay, we shared some very specific things that if you don't have these things in place, go contact your IT provider and say, hey, look, these are things that Todd and David were talking about. Let me go and set those things up that's in place. But, I think the big takeaway is like, that's it. Like if you have an on-site server, I'm almost positive you've maximized the lifetime of that server. Let's go ahead and let's move you to the Microsoft cloud environment. Again, on your own, a provider with us, whatever. And I guess I'll just share this last tidbit. We don't see a lot of clients doing it themselves because there's a little bit, there's some complexity that's involved in that. Most of our clients are either, hiring us or they're hiring an IT provider to do that. Because again, there are some complexities. But plus they're not skilled in this area anyways, that's not, and typically an RIA doesn't have like an on-site IT person anyways, right? They don't have somebody on their payroll that's their IT guy, or IT gal. So, but yeah.
Well, great. So also ditch the server, guys. Ditch your on-site server. That's kind of like the main theme that we've been covering today. So David, as always, great stuff. And look, David is always here. He's the real better expert than I am on all this stuff. So feel free to, shoot David an email or even post it in the comments below. He's looking at that. We're looking at that. And so we're happy to answer any questions you guys have on that kind of migration. So, hey, another episode for us in the can. So we want to thank you for listening to the RIA Tech Talk Podcast, brought to you by RIA WorkSpace. And for more podcasts and resources, make sure you go to www.riaworkspace.com and check out the Learning Center. And like I said, make sure you like us, subscribe to us, and put some questions out in the field there because we love those. And also, if there's something you want to hear from us as far as an episode goes, please let us know. We'll do our best to make that come true. All right, and also stay tuned. More episodes are coming up with RIA Tech Insights in more episodes. So for David and myself, thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you.